Hello, everyone.
Hello,
My name is Ahmed,
and I'm Jenny.
and we are so pleased to welcome you all to our first session on AMP. In this session, you are going to learn about AMP and how it's going to grow your business further. So, over to you, Jeannie,
Thank
to
you
tell
for
more about OPG.
Thank you, Ahmad, for the opportunity. So nice to meet you guys. I'm Jenny, and today I'm really happy because I can share with you a topic that I'm personally passionate about, which is how you can win on mobile with AMP. So a little bit of fun fact. Since the end of 2016, the number of smartphone finally exceed the number of PC in the market. So by not winning on mobile, you're pretty much it's difficult for you to succeed in the long term. And however, when it comes to mobile, there's a couple of challenges. So number one, when it comes to mobile, publishers are facing a difficulty in retention of users and engaging users. And this, of course, lead to difficulty in maximizing the mobile revenue. Users today expect a lot from your mobile sites. The longer you make them wait for the page to load, the larger the percentage of your visitor loss. A site that loads 10 seconds, for example, will risk 58% of visitor loss. So mobile page speed is really important. And it's not only important to minimize your visitor loss, but it also correlates positively with your ad viewability. And by the way, what is ad viewability? It is actually a measure on how many percent of your ad impression is actually seen by the users. So for example, you have 3 ads on on your page, top, middle, and bottom, but your user only browse until the second part of the page and only see 2 ads on that page, then the viewability is 67%. And of course, ads that are not seen cannot be clicked. Because of that, visibility in turns correlates positively with its CPM. So the larger the visibility, the ad viewability, the better the CPM. So the next question is, how much revenue uplift would you approximately get when you improve the site's page speed? You can quickly Google now, mobile speed adds up, and you'll be able to spot this URL on the top. And you can insert relevant values to your website, and you'll be able to see the estimated value of your website if you improve the page speed. So while page speed is really important for mobile sites today, many of the mobile sites do not meet this demand. Slow loading speed or poor loading strategy could lead to various unpleasant experience for the user. For example, the page become unresponsive, or when users are browsing for your content, the ads pushing down the content, and it will be very unpleasant for the user. So if you imagine this as the speed of the average mobile site, ideally we want to hard tune your site so that you can be as fast as this. But I know it's not as simple as that. For the past 3 years of my careers in Google, I worked with over 600 Southeast Asian publishers, and I learned that hard tuning to improve the page speed is often a luxury. This is why I'm so happy that we have AMP. It is like an instant solution to significantly improve your mobile page speed with relatively marginal investment from your site. Especially if you're using WordPress, like I know many of you do based on the questions, implementation is so much easy with plugins. And thank you so much for everyone that has submitted questions before the live stream. It helps me to shape this presentation. So actually, based on the question that you submitted, I'm customizing my presentation today to cover 3 main pillars. Number 1, introduction to AMP, what is a pro and con, and then a couple of success stories. And number 2, how you can get started with AMP, what kind of tool, what kind of how you can get discovered via Google search or social media platforms, and what kind of super channels that you can leverage. And most importantly, the last part is monetization, how you can maximize the monetization of your AMP pages. So what is AMP? AMP stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages. It is an open source initiative that can help you build a better user experience. AMP make your mobile site load much faster and scroll so much smoother, while still giving you the flexibility to customize and style your site's layout. AMP also provides the opportunity for you to distribute your content, not only from Google, but also various platforms such as Bing, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on. Compared to your regular non-Heartune mobile site, which sometimes we refer as canonical, an AMP page consumes 10 times less data and loads 4 times faster. And one of you asked if you can customize the AMP page layout. So the answer is yes. Here are some examples of AMP pages from our friends from The Guardian, eBay, CNN, and Vogue. Basically, you can preserve your branding and you can customize your page to as close as your canonical layout. Some of you also ask if AMP pages can be consumed outside the Google search. The answer is yes. Today, your AMP pages can be discovered and consumed in Pinterest, LinkedIn, Twitter, Medium, and the list has been growing rapidly. In fact, just last year, Sogo, Baidu, and Yahoo Japan decided to link AMP pages to their search results. And providing a good user experience has been rewarding for the publishers. Here are a couple of publishers that has looking at a good ROI after they implemented AMP. For Terra, users spend 3 times more time on AMP pages, while for Times, AMP has increased user time spent on the site by 13%. For Gizmodo and Mail.ru, procurement of new traffic is really important. And we are happy to say that, for example, in Mail.ru, there are up to 67% uplift in new user. And for the Washington Post, they have been benefited with 23% uplift in returning daily users. So retention is really good. And when it comes to monetization, which many of you ask, Tips.tv has seen 2 times uplift in the CTR for AMP pages. I also want to share 2 additional case studies that is closer to home in APAC. One of them is India Today, which recently launched. For India Today, they see 3 times uplift in ad viewability and 2 times uplift in CTR. The cool part is that when we compare the performance of ads on the AMP page versus non-AMP page, the AMP page of India Today yield 23% higher ad revenue than the non-AMP pages. Lastly, I want to share a special case, which is a publisher that I manage directly. It's bacatourist.com. So bacatourist.com is a lifestyle website. And the cool thing is that this website is empowered by WordPress CMS, which I know many of you use WordPress as well. So according to the founder, implementation with WordPress plugin is fairly easy, and he definitely happy with the ROI. He got 64% faster loading time, and most importantly, 47% higher CTR and 25% higher at RPM. Just October last year, AMP has turned 2 years, and within these 2 years, we've been going a long way. 4 billion AMP pages have been published from over 25 million domains. And of course, the performance of AMP and the benefit that each publisher receives might be different from publisher to publishers, depending on how much they optimize their AMP pages and their canonical pages. But the good news is that we are happy to report by average, there are 10% increase in traffic year on year for those that implement AMP. And we see that 60% increase in pages per visit, which is a good retention metric. And for those of you who are in e-commerce website, you're happy to hear that there's an uplift in 20% sales conversion rate for AMP pages. And consistently for all these websites that are using AMP, we see an average of 2 times time spent more on the AMP pages. So the next question is how you get started with AMP. Again, it depends on how you build your site. For supported CMS such as WordPress, implementation is as simple as plugin installation. You can leverage the support for AMP provided by this respective CMS. For custom HTML users, don't worry. There are 3 resources that I want to share with you today. The first one is ampproject.org, the official site of AMP that provided you every single information that you need, including step-by-step complete AMP guidance. We also have ampbyexample.com for those of you who want to quickly get a sample code. For example, you want to get a code for creating a comment section or poll section in AMP pages. You can quickly go to this website, grab the sample codes, and see the demo of these features. And lastly, my personal favorite is ampstart.com. This is where you can download free, ready-to-use template. You can just pick a basic template that you want, change the content and the styling to your liking, test with Validator, upload to your server, check out how it looks like, and then voila, you're done. By the way, in case you're wondering, you can download the PDF version of this presentation slide at tinyurl.com/ampmasterclass. So you can download this slide and you can get access to various hyperlinks and tools and resources in this presentation slide. And before I forget, I want to mention something that's really important when you are building your AMP pages. Please make sure that you link your AMP pages with your canonical or non-AMP pages. So this is the common mistake that many publishers are doing. Don't forget to copy paste the first code on the header section of your non-AMP pages. And then for the second code, you want to copy paste on the AMP pages on the head section. And of course, every time you create an AMP pages, don't forget to validate the code. You can use the tools I give shown here to copy paste the URL of your AMP pages. And you'll see this sign, the green button, if your AMP page is valid. And when your AMP page is not valid, this is what you'll expect to see. But don't worry, the cool thing about this tool is that they will let you know why it is invalid. All you need to do is click on it, and they will let you know which is the line that has the error. So it's easier for you to troubleshoot. So also a lot of you ask, how can my content be discovered on Google search? In general, there are 4 different ways that a valid AMP page can appear on Google search. So the main prerequisite is you have to make sure that your AMP page is valid. So you can use the tool that I shared just now. So the first form is called Blue Link. It is that mini AMP logo that is tagged on your site on the search result. As long as your page is a valid AMP page, the blue link will appear. And if you are employing structured data, your site will be qualified to appear in the second, third, and fourth form. I'll go through what is structured data in a short while, but before that, let me introduce the second way your AMP page can be discovered on Google search. So the second one is host carousel. So let me just give you an example. Let's say, Ahmad, you like soccer? So Ahmad likes soccer, and let's say during the World Cup, Ahmad wants to search for Arsenal or Chelsea. And let's say my website is soccerdaily.com. So obviously, when Ahmad is searching for Arsenal, there are multiple results from my page that has content about Arsenal. So the cool thing about host carousel is that user can quickly looking at the carousel of list of Arsenal articles from Ahmad from my website. So it's easy for Ahmad to browse the article that I want to see, and it improves the click-through rate from search to your website. So we also have the top story. It's different from host carousel. Top story features carousel from multiple website sources, not just from one website. And top story appear on the first part of the search result, which improve the viewability of your search result. So one thing I want to take note is that in order for your site to appear on top story or have the high probability of appearing there, naturally your website already have a good SEO, meaning that even without AMP, it should already appear on the first or second page result of that query. And lastly, we have Rich Card. So Rich Card enable Google search to feature your pages on search result in a very engaging manner. Today, we have 3 different verticals: recipe, film, and restaurant. We plan to launch more verticals. And just giving you an example, you can see on the left, here is an example of a recipe Rich Card. So for example, your website is about recipe, and then you put the right structured data. Then on the search result, this is what the user would look like. So the next question is, how can you get into this form, into host carousel, into Rich Card, into top story? So you need a structured data. To put it simply, structured data is a standardized format for providing information about a page and classifying the page content. So Google used the structured data that they find on the web to understand the content of the page. For example, let's make this structure data. Make an example of this rich card on the left. In order for Google search to know what is the image, you need to put image.http or recipes.com/pancake.jpg, for example. And then from the code on the right, they also let Google search know what is the headline, what is the description, what's the aggregate rating, and so on and so on. So pretty much whatever that is put on the right will enable Google search to show whatever that you see on the left. So some structured data properties are required, while some is highly recommended. To find out the list of required structured data for your page to appear on Rich Card, Top Story, or Host Carousel, you can check out the link below that I put here. They have the complete list that you can look at. Again, it is always important you always test your structured data. If you use this tool, you can just copy-paste your page URL, or you can copy-paste the code snippet of the structured data. And once you put the run the test, you can see whether or not there's an error or warnings for your structured data. The cool thing is that, as I mentioned, Google search is not the only platform where your AMP pages can be discovered. Do check out each platform guides to make the most out of your AMP pages. Different platforms have different guides. So I'll just give you a very quick example from Twitter. So the code that you see on the left is an example of meta text that you can use, that if you have it on your AMP pages, when your AMP pages is being shared on the Twitter, then it will appear as the card that is shown on the right. So more information you can check out on the Twitter page that I linked below. So I hope this is helpful for you guys. So if you have any question when it comes to building an AMP pages on how to get discovered on search and other platform, you can go to ampproject.org and you can click support. You'll be able to see various support channels that can help you, be it Stack Overflow community or Slack channel. Now, the part that you guys are more interested is monetization. In general, AMP offers publisher a flexibility in monetizing their pages. Publisher can control their monetization the same way as any other HTML page. And the cool thing is that paywall and subscription model are also supported in AMP. Publisher can control who can access which content. For example, you can tag people who pay for subscription as subscriber and people who don't as anonymous. And then you can dictate, let's say this article can only be accessed by subscriber, something like that. And the cool thing is that many analytics and ad tech providers have also embraced AMP. Now we have over 70 plus ad demands and platforms that are supported by AMP, and the list is growing. AMP also support broad range of ad format. As long as the ad format is standard ad format, it is supported by AMP. And of course, some of you ask, so what's the con? I know sometimes direct deal or like certain ad network that have non-standardized ad format that is not supported in AMP right now. But anyway, we want to focus what's the best for the user. So the cool thing is that as long as the ad format are standardized, they are supported. So what can publisher expect in terms of monetization? I'll be very honest and say it depends. It depends on how you set up your ad. And the good news is that majority of the publishers are seeing improved performance after implementing AMP. 90% of publishers that use AMP sees a higher CTR and 80% experience a higher viewability. So again, I mentioned it depends on how you optimize your AMP pages and the monetization. So of course, most of you will ask, so Jenny, how then we make sure that we optimize our ads on AMP? Let me walk you through a couple of best practices. So today I'll be sharing 5 tips, which encompasses 3 key pillars in optimizing AMP ads optimization. So it's something to do with your ad placement, where you put your ad. It's something to do with the ad density, like the number of ads in your page. It's something to do with demand parity, making sure that your inventory is demanded equally. So first thing first, I recommend that you make a unique ad unit for your AMP pages. Ensure that you also have a unique ad unit for different ad placement. This will help you optimize your ad placement in the future. Now that you have a separate ad unit, you can check the performance of each ad unit and placement and optimize for their ad viewability. Of course, you ask me, why do you keep asking about ad viewability? Why does it matter? So I'm not so sure about you. What would you do when you see a big ad on the first viewport when you load a page? I don't know about you. I usually will intuitively scroll down to the paragraph to read the page content. And most of the time, because I'm using 3G, probably the ad hasn't loaded by the time I scroll down. So I won't see the ad. The chances of me clicking that ad will be lower. So your user could be similar to me, especially if they are browsing with a slower internet connection like 3G. There are high chances that user have scrolled down before the ad even load. Lower ad viewability would lead to lower ad CTR and subsequently lowers RPM. That's why I recommend you to put ads after content. For example, for ad number 1, put the ads after 1 viewport or 700 pixel, or at least after 1 or 2 paragraph of content. So for those of you who are using WordPress CMS, you use ad inserter, you can just make sure that there is 1 or 2 paragraph before you put an ad. It's very simple. And how about ad number 2, 3, and 4? I recommend that you put approximately 2 to 3 viewports of content separation for the subsequent ads. Of course, different site and layout have different optimal ad placement. So I always recommend you to check this metric, active view viewable. It is actually a metric to measure the ad viewability of the ads. And I recommend for you to try to get above 40% viewability for your AMP pages. In case you are curious, this is how I will consider the order of different layout in terms of performances. So this is coming from my background as for AdSense and DFP. So might be a little bit different if you're using third-party ad network or direct deal. But based on AdSense, DFP, and AdX, the first one is bad because, as I mentioned, sometimes user might quickly scroll down to the content before they look at the ads. And then for the second one and third one, the reason why the third one is the best, because for AdSense and AdX, usually 300 times 250 perform much better than 320 times 100, which is pretty much my tips number 3. So for AdSense users, 300 times 250 or 336 times 280 is performing the best for AMP. Of course, if you are monetizing with either third-party ad network or direct deals, again, you have to do your research. Lastly, we also recommend that you avoid heavy creative. This is especially true for those of you who are monetizing with third party, be it direct or third party ad network. Make sure that the format chosen met the IAB standard. And also, when you're comparing ad performance on AMP versus Canonical, make sure you're comparing similar set of ad formats for a good apple-to-apple comparison. Let me give you an example. So some of you have a website that use link ad unit, and link ad might be performing really well for certain types of website. So if, let's say, your Canonical website, you use a link ad, and then your AMP pages, you're using a display ads, of course, that's not a same consistent format, and that's not a good apple-to-apple comparison for you to judge. Lastly, I can't stress enough, make sure that you have a consistent ad strategy between your AMP pages and Canonical. Do check that you have similar number of ad density or similar number of ads and the same demand parity. Here's an example of checklist that I made for my partner. Note that this checklist can vary publisher to publisher depending on your profile. For example, this publisher is a DFP and AdX user. The partner is completing some of their inventory with 300 times 250 display banner with native. And they also implement multi-size, and they also implement video ads. So when the partner implement AMP, he told me that he is shocked that the revenue on AMP was not performing as well as Canonical. That sounds familiar, right? So when we deep dive, turns out that there is a demand parity. And the main, there's inconsistency of demand between Canonical and AMP, so they don't basically they don't compete native and 300 times 250 on AMP while they do that in Canonical. They don't implement multi-size. They don't implement video. So of course, this demand parity is the culprit for lower RPM. Remember, the higher the demand, the higher the yield. So start by implementing the same price strategy as your Canonical size and then optimize from there. So what metrics can indicate if your ad setup has been optimized? Again, it depends from publisher to publisher, but as an example for the previous publishers, we are using a combination of ad request CPM because it's AdX, ad eCPM, and coverage. If you are an AdSense publisher using the same number of ads and the same number of ad formats on AMP and Canonical, page RPM could be a simple alternative to indicate how you perform on AMP versus Canonical. So the simpler way is always to have the same number of ads, same number of ad formats on AMP and Canonical. If you want to pull the AMP ads performance on DFP or AdX, you can simply go to query and filter inventory type. And then for AdSense, you can simply go to your UI, go to a common report, and then change the report type to content platform. From there, you'll see the breakdown of performance of AMP versus the Canonical. This is also another example from Indonesia. In here, you can see that Mediscus is putting their ads after one viewport, whereas for Baca Terus, they put the first ad after the first paragraph. And then you can see on the left, this is a breakdown of performance from each ad unit. So what they do is that they have the exact ad implementation ad format on AMP versus Canonical. And then you can see here the uplift of RPM and viewability for every single ad unit. As you can see, pretty much it's a consistent increase in terms of RPM and viewability. So the last but not least, for those of you who are using AdSense, how are you able to implement AdSense ads on AMP? So there are two simple steps. Number one, this is very important, by the way. Make sure you do not forget to copy paste this code on the head part section of your AMP pages. This is the common mistake. And if you don't copy paste this, your ad will be invalid. So make sure you do so. And number two, you can decide which type of ads you want to use. Either you want to use a responsive ad or you want to use a control ad sizes. So let's start with the responsive ad. First step is for you to go to AdSense front end and create a responsive ad unit. So once you do that, usually you'll get a code that you see on the left. And what you want to do with that code is that you take out the value of data at client and data at slot, which is what I highlighted in yellow. So for example, in here, the data at client is your CA pop 1, 2, 3, 4, basically your property code. And then your data at slot is pretty much is the ad slot ID, which is unique for that ad unit. And then once you get these two data, you're just going to copy paste the code that I share with you right now in the MP ad code. You just have to change the data at client and the data at slot value to what you have. And after that, you just have to copy paste this whole code to your page. It's very simple. And one thing that I want you to take note, we strongly recommend that you don't modify any other parts of the above ad code, as this may cause your ad code to stop working. So only change the ad slot ID and only change the one that I highlight in yellow, basically. And also make sure that you don't place your ad code inside a parent container, such as div, iframe, and so on, that has a fixed or limited height, or your ad might change size and it might break your page layout. So if you have a fixed size div, I recommend you to use the second type of ad, which is the control size ad unit for AMP. So how to implement it is very simple. You just have to follow the first two steps that I mentioned just now. Create a new ad unit, get the data at client, and get the data at slot. Once you do that, depending on what you like, do you want to fix both width and height, or maybe you want to fix the height only? You can choose any of the two. Let's say if you want to fix height only, you can choose the one on the left. If you want to choose fix both width and height, then you go to the right. And so don't forget to copy paste the right code on the the one that I highlight in yellow. And those that I highlight in green means that you can choose what values that you want. But as a precaution, make sure that you use the value that is supported by AdSense. So let's say if you put the width and the height like 310 times 250, that is not supported by AdSense. That will cause another error as well. And one thing that I want to highlight when it comes to, I did mention that 300 times 250 and 336 times 280 is performing well on AdSense on AMP, but please make sure that you don't violate any AdSense policy. So when it comes to using 300 times 250 above the fold, you have to make sure that you have sufficient content, and you have to make sure that this ad unit does not push content down such that there is no enough content above the fold. Again, if you want to be very safe, you can always put 1 or 2 paragraphs before you put the ads. Not only it's policy compliant, not only it's safe, but it's also perform better. So just a recap, AMP is an open source platform. Anyone can contribute to the code and can make improvement and build components. And AMP also offers publisher flexibility for monetization, which support not only AdSense, DFP, and edX, but also 70 different ad networks and platforms. And of course, the number of partners has been increasing throughout the year. And AMP enable content discovery through multiple platforms, including popular content discovery platforms such as Pinterest, LinkedIn, Tencent, Qzone, Weibo, Baidu, and so on. There is no restriction on sharing the publisher content, and publisher receives the credit for the traffic, which is really cool. And also, AMP support paywalls and subscription. So that's pretty much the end of my presentation, but I want to answer a couple of your questions from the Q&A sections. So first thing first, some of you asked, I use WordPress, how can I implement AMP? So there's a lot of plugins that you can search in WordPress.org that can help you to implement AMP. So this is just an example from Automatic. Feel free to pick the one that best fits you. Don't forget to read the rating, the comments, and so on and so on. Question number 2, my revenue dropped after implementing AMP. What could be the cause? So during my presentation, I think I shared a couple of possible causes. But on top of that, I was actually doing a research about 2 weeks ago, the top 50 for websites that have AMP but performing less than Canonical. I look at top 50 and I look at it one by one. The most common reason is that lower ad density. So 90% of them has lower number of ad units per page on AMP versus Canonical. So that's one thing for you to consider. And I also noticed that 55% causes is that you're using 336 times 280 or 300 times 250 above the fold before content. And we also see demand parity as the main cause of poor performance. So sometimes publisher forget to set up the line item in DFP. That's very common, so double check. And also they forget to optimize the edX open auction pricing rules. So do not forget about your setting for AMP. And lastly, again, I gave you an example of the link ad units previously. Inconsistent ad format or size that I use on AMP versus Canonical is definitely another reason why you don't see it as much. And then lastly, 25% of the website that I saw have incorrect AMP ad implementation. And 20% can actually detect it easily with the AMP validator. So again, always test your website every time you done a changes. So when it comes to ad placement or ad implementation, what are the common mistakes that publishers make? There are 2. Number 1, publisher copy paste the normal ad code from AdSense, which I mentioned you shouldn't do that. You should just take the ad slot ID and so on and so on. And ads in AMP must be served over HTTPS using the AMP ads component. So just now, you can just copy paste the code that I shared with you, just change the ad slot ID and the property code, you are good to go. Number 2, make sure that you import the AMP ad component in the header. So copy paste this code on the head section of your AMP pages. And I also include here an example. If you click on it, you'll have the sample ad code for AMP. So I hope that's helpful. And And also have a question. On Google Analytics, seems that AMP pages have higher bounce rate than canonical. Why? So let me explain a little bit. When users go to Google search and they land into your AMP pages, they read, they like your content, and they want to read more, so they click somewhere on your AMP pages, but they got redirected to your non-AMP pages, which is your regular site. The user's client ID would be different, and it is registered as bounce by Google Analytics. But you can fix it easily. So what you need to do on the AMP pages, on the header section, you want to add this code, the first one, the meta name. And for the canonical or the non-AMP pages, depending whether you're using JavaScript, analytics.javascript, or the Google Tag Manager, you can follow these two steps that I highlighted just now. So some of you apparently have an e-commerce website that monetizes with AdSense, and you are interested in AMP. Yes, you can use AMP to create your e-commerce website as well. I'll give you an example. For example, AMP bind is a component that you can use that enable user to interact more with your product. For example, you're selling a t-shirt, and then you have a color palette where the t-shirt are being sold. If a user click yellow, for example, the document of the shirt will change to a yellow shirt, something like that. So do explore a lot of components on ampproject.org that can help you to create your e-commerce site. And also, some of you was worried that AMP pages will take away your traffic, or you want to have more traffic on your canonical site. The good news is that number one, not only that you can claim AMP traffic as your own traffic. Number two, Google make it really easy for people who land on AMP pages to go quickly to your canonical site. Since January last year, canonical URL could be easily accessed via AMP pages. And when users share your page, your AMP page, instead of sharing the AMP pages, they will automatically copy paste the canonical URL. So yeah, that's about it. If you have any questions and you need help for AMP implementation, AMP discovery, and so on, you can go to ampproject.org/support. You will have a lot of options for support channels. And if you need help specifically on AdSense monetization on AMP, we have a help center at support.google.com/AdSense, where you have a lot of information there. And make sure that you are browse using your Google AdSense on your browser. That way you can also contact our support team, which you can click on the top right-hand corner, and we are always happy to help you. So yeah, that's about it. I really hope that this session has been helpful. I always believe that if we focus on the user, everything else will follow. And I'm really happy to say that some of my partners who have been implementing AMP really genuinely see there's an uplift and reward on their side. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you.